I'll open the regular City Council meeting for July 14th, 2014. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The audience might notice that there's something a little bit different up here. For the first time in 6+ years, Don Urim is not sitting over where Ann Monkey is now sitting. And where's Holly? She's not attending. I assume by now everybody is aware that both Don and Holly are leaving the City of Victoria. Don to go to the City of Wayzata as the Director of Administration, and Holly to go to Belle Plaine as a City Administrator. These are two very, very capable people who served our city well. We're going to miss them, but none of us would ever want to stand in the way of someone seeking a better opportunity, and that's clearly what both of those individuals feel. So tonight we're going to go and take some steps that hopefully start to put the finger in the dike and get back to business as usual, because we've got a full agenda. We've talked about the 13.5 acres. We've got a grocery store we're trying to lobby to help fill. We've got 2 buildings that are coming out of the ground, and that's when the fun really begins. It's one thing to approve a budget and approve a set of plans, but when you put the shovel in the ground and you find out what's underneath the ground level, then that's when the fun really begins. So we've got a lot to do, and we're going to get on with it now. So with that in mind, Ann, are there any changes to the agenda as published?
Mr. Mayor, no changes to the agenda.
Can I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the agenda. Next is the open forum. It's an opportunity for citizens to address the council on items not on the current agenda. Does anybody wish to address the council? Seeing none, we'll go to the consent agenda, which is an motion that will approve a series of agenda items, a series of resolutions with one motion, unless anybody on the council wishes to remove something from the consent agenda. Anybody wish to remove? Joe?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to remove under Community Development D, amendment to the 2014 fee schedule.
That's item D. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the amended consent agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the amended consent agenda. Joe, item D, amendment to the 2014 fee schedule.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just looking at the increase in the cost for those fees, I think it's just worthwhile that we actually discuss that in greater length. It just seems to me that, you know, those percent increases are rather high, and to have it go through without really any discussion is seems to me that we need to discuss that more.
Okay.
So I guess I'd like just an explanation of how we came up with those costs, what the future revenues would be to Victoria, and maybe how we compare to other cities, our fees compared to theirs.
Kelly, you want to handle that?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll do my best to get through this one. The city has been using the same fee structure for building permits since 2007. Ideally, you would change those every year, a few years, as the state changes their schedule. However, in 2008, when the economy went into recession and we had building permits decreasing, the thought was we're not going to do anything with these. We want to encourage as much development as possible. And so we were kind of in a mode of not changing any of our fees for quite a number of years. And then recently, when our building official was on medical leave, we had another community was doing our building permits. We also had an independent contractor come in, and in looking at what we were charging compared to other communities, we were significantly lower. So the thought was we should at least get on the current state valuation schedule. So attached in the packet, there is information from the state which identifies the the current building permit values per square footage, depending upon the type of construction involved. So if you take, for example, single-family residential, they have a range for that particular type of building, from the high end of 126.20 per square foot to 98.16 at the low end. So
Point that out in our packet. What sheet are you looking at?
it says building valuation data for May 2014, it's page 2.
Page 2.
So if you go down to R3, which is residential 1 and 2 family,
Yep.
there's a range of values under the columns. It goes from 1A, which would be the highest value, all the way down to VB, which is what we are proposing to get on is the low end of the scale. So we would go to 98.16 per square foot finished compared to the $77 that we're at now. If we had been increasing incrementally over the last 7 years, we'd probably be close to that value now. We just haven't done anything since 2007 to change it.
And you didn't make these numbers up. Where'd they come from?
These are published by the State Department of Labor and Industry.
For
So
what
they have a
purpose?
building inspection code department, and they put these values out that most communities use for their building department pricing.
It's not we're not obligated to follow them, but it's there for us to take advantage of.
No, there's no obligation. You can set it as high or low as you want. The only thing is there should be some connection between the fees you charge compared to how much it costs you to provide services. And for the last 3 years, I've completed it's an overall report we do that compares development and building inspection fees compared to our expenses, just to see how close we are. And with the construction we've done for Wasserman Lake over the past few years, along with some of the street and utility reconstruction, we actually have been spending more than we've taken in when you compare all of the dollars involved. So it's not going to be on a year for year where you're exactly the same, but over time you should average out to where your revenues and expenses are equal.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what's the projected net revenue increase if we enact these fees?
I just did some very rough calculations where I looked at the number of homes we're projecting with the new square footage values compared to the number of permits we've had, and then also looked at some of the other ones like the unfinished basements, porches, decks, and I'm estimating it's going to be at least 100,000, probably a little more than that on an annual basis.
So do we have a place in the budget where we'll be cutting $100,000? I guess my concern is that, we're raising taxes and then now, we're going to add an additional $100,000 to the budget just by raising fees. And to me, we should be going the opposite way. I'd like to see these stay flat for another year.
I guess my view is that if we've reviewed this annually since 2007 and found that we could live without charging the residents an extra $100,000 for permission to improve their property, we can live without it now. Or some percentage increase that's more relevant for yesterday it was X, today, 2-3% something. But to try and play catch up for 7 years, I don't support that.
I think it's relevant, though. You said the one development you looked at, we were providing services. These are not just fees that go into the budget. There's a cost associated with doing the work. And if the cost, or the revenue from the fee doesn't cover the cost of providing the service, we either have a service that's too costly or we have to raise our fees. No? Joe?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So what's the breakdown then of new developments versus existing homes with existing residents?
In terms of overall revenue?
Yeah, I'm putting on a porch. What's that breakdown? I mean, I guess I wouldn't mind seeing some increase maybe to the new developments, but for the people that have built their house and, like Mr. Striegel said, that are just improving their own property, it seems to me that they shouldn't be the ones having to pay for this big increase.
Yeah, by far, the majority of the increase would be for new home permits, because they have the highest fee level. You know, it would go from 77 to 98. If you're looking at an unfinished basement, the increase would be from $15.40 to $16.50. So that'd be a very minor increase. Items like decks and porches, we don't have the number for deck available on here, but a porch would go from $26 to $37. Most of the fees for decks, porches, and remodels come in around $250, depending upon what the value is. Sometimes they're only $100. And in terms of our total revenue that we take in for building permits, it's probably close to 70% of that is from new homes.
Is this sheet helpful?
It would be if I had it in front of me.
And I guess it's just a compounding effect, you know, our taxes are going up, we have to pay for water, and I'm sure the water rates aren't gonna go down. You know, I just got my dog license, that's $30 a year to have a dog. You know, it's just one thing after another, and it just seems like it's always going up. And here's I think a perfect spot to keep them low. You know, I've heard that our fees in Victoria are high, the park dedication, you know, you name it. It seems like here's a prime opportunity to say, you know, come to Victoria, you know, our fees are low, all right. It just seems reasonable to keep them where they're at.
I guess the only thing I'd point out with that is that if the building permit revenues went up by $100,000 and our expenses don't change, we would probably cut our levy by $100,000. So it's not that expenses would go up or we'd spend more, there'd be an offsetting cut to the levy.
And thank you for saying that, because I started to rethink a little bit and say, I'm actually a fairly big fan of pay for what you use. So I would look for this revenue increase to be offset, whether it's a general property tax reduction or a reduction in water rates, whatever the general fund was paying to have these building inspections done before, take that money out somewhere else.
Would you make well,
That would be reasonable.
we'll have to vote on this, but it seems to me that's an item that as we go through the budget process, that ought to be consciously addressed. What's the impact of the increased fees and what's the offset, if any? Are we spending it? Are we proposing to spend it, or are we going to cut the levy? That ought to be a conscious decision. Joe, you want to make a motion? And
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
Council, one thing that maybe we can also try to put together is some information on the actual costs of what the building inspection costs, so then we can show that actual dollar amount that we're pulling in with those items too, to get a better picture of what we're looking at. To have a little more comprehensive.
there is a cost, yeah. Joe, do
I
you
guess I'd like to wait until we've got some numbers or a better game plan than just trusting us that we're going to cut it, because I don't know if we'll do it.
Is there a time requirement in terms of either approving this schedule tonight or not at all?
I just go back to, I'm quite confident we'll cut it. We've been pretty strong in doing that, and
One thing we've not been accused of is hesitating to cut the levy.
exactly, and so I'm fine with going forward with it as it is, knowing that when the budget comes about, Kelly heard us tonight, and I'm confident she'll do this.
Well, let's see where it goes. I'll make a motion to approve amendment to the 2014 fee schedule billing permits. It's Resolution 1452.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-1. Finance? No, we didn't. Payment of the bills.
I'll make a motion that we approve the, what is today, the 14th?
July 14th.
14th claims roster in the amount of $681,347.47.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We've approved the claims roster. Donations?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 14-54, a resolution accepting donations from the following contributors. Deer Run Homeowners Group in the amount of $1,200 designated for a memorial trail bench. A memorial to David Lindgren in the amount of $100 to Concerts in the Park. Another memorial to David Lindgren in the amount of $250 to designated to the fire department. And those memorials were donated by Mary Hirschberger Toon and David Toon, and then by Barbara Lindgren, respectively. And then a donation from the Chaska Lions in the amount of $26,000 to the Park and Rec Committee as a charitable gambling donation.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And do you just explain the $26,000, where that comes from and how we end up with that pot of money?
I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, Council. The Chaska Lions Club runs the pull tab operations at Vic's and Floyd's. And several years ago, in agreement with the city, we collect about 10% of those proceeds from the charitable gambling that occurs in those two businesses.
And it goes to a Park and Rec fund, and what happens to it?
We have used that in the past for scholarships. We have used that also for projects at Lions Park most recently. So those are projects that we do in concert with the Lions Club, the Victoria Lions Club.
Any other discussion? We have a motion on the table with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved and accepted donations. We have no public hearing. We have unfinished business, the appraisal of the 13.5 acres, parcel D, 65 and change.
Mr. Mayor, Council, earlier this evening, a workshop was held to discuss the 13.5 acre property. Based on the discussion earlier today, staff is looking for some recommendations from the council on whether to proceed with an appraisal, or if you choose to wait until after the staff and developer have a chance to talk about possible changes in the development of that property.
How do people feel? Joe, you brought this up as one of the...
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to move forward with an appraisal. I think, you know, we've invested quite a bit of money into that property over the years. I think it's like $2.7 million is what we invested. And, you know, dealing with the developer, it seems that our idea and what their idea of what it's worth is different enough that I think it's worth getting an appraisal. And, you know, the appraisal will be good for a while. And so even if we don't cut a deal with this developer, at least we've got a number of what a professional appraiser thinks the property is worth, and we can, you know, there won't be any big discussions of what the property is worth. It'll be, are we getting a good deal, or are we willing to sell it for less to get something else?
Is your concern that we're overvaluing or undervaluing the property?
I don't know. And I think that's why it would be good to have an appraisal.
One of the things to keep in mind when we do if we vote to do an appraisal is that the definition of the land use, as it says in the agenda statement, is crucial to the value. If we state the land use is, for argument's sake, single-family residential, that would have one potential value. If we say it's the land use is as what we talked about during the workshop with some sort of multifamily units, housing units, that would have another value. So it's going to be important that we define for the appraiser what our estimate of the land uses are.
Yeah, I guess I would envision that it would be we get an appraisal for what it's zoned at now, and then any hypothetical condition that we want, like it's a medium density. So we'd get two values, one for the high density, one for medium density, and whatever other scenario we would like to come up with.
Do you define medium density as what we talked
Yeah,
about, right?
like-
40, even another 100?
Sure,
maybe?
whatever that is.
So in the end, and I'm leaning at this point to say, no, I'm not in favor of the appraisal. We have a data point. And that data point, yes, it's valuable information to have, but in the end, it doesn't matter until you have an agreement between a buyer and seller. And if we have not yet defined what the land use will be, I'm concerned that having an appraisal at this point in time is a waste of money. Because it's clear from our discussion in the workshop that there are several variables here at play, and I'm thinking maybe we need to work that out first before we come back and consider a formal appraisal.
I guess I'm inclined to agree. We don't have really a definition for what the property is, what the ultimate use of the property could be or should be. I mean, I think we should have a conversation that says, what do we really want there,
We have-
if anything?
I agree. We have 30 seconds of a conversation between our broker and the potential buyer on what it might be. I think that conversation needs to go quite a bit further before we...
Well, how would you all feel? I mean, again, I think what you're hearing, at least from me and I think from Jim, is a genuine acceptance of the notion of an appraisal. It's just a matter of the timing.
And stepwise, that's where I'm going as well, is that we need to take the time to define what the use would be, what we want it to be, maybe multiple scenarios. Get that defined, and then, but I am in favor of having an appraisal before we do a transaction. But I think we need to spend a little time on the front end to outline how it could be used best.
Joe, how about you? You're the one who really raised this. Are you okay if we do a little bit more work at the front end?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, I guess, but the point, or at least what I think of the point of the appraisal, is not to tell the appraiser, you know, townhomes on this property. It's up to the appraiser to look at what's going on in the market and say, you know, here, townhomes and apartment buildings or this area are selling, and here are the comps, and here's...
But that's not the appraiser's responsibility. The appraiser is to take a look at it from the standpoint of how it's zoned and provide us with an appraisal. If we're considering changing that, and there are many different ways that we can change that, again, my concern is we're going to get an appraisal that's meaningless.
I guess then I wish Holly was here, but, you know, I don't know what's considered in each of the zoning, you know, if medium density includes commercial, all of that stuff. Seems to me that we should have an appraisal for each condition. Like I said, high density, medium density, or if we get too specific, I think that defeats the purpose.
Well, I think you're hearing, I mean, at least from my position, I'm in favor of having an appraisal done. It's just a matter, I'd like to see a little more definition about what we think are acceptable uses.
I agree.
Okay. So we'll wait, table it.
Take no action on this tonight. Take action to define the land uses, and then come back with a proposal.
I move we table this until such a time we have further definition on the use of the property. Is that the correct
It's okay.
procedure? As moved.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
We've tabled it. The interim city manager. Just let me lead this off a little bit, maybe. Earlier this evening, we interviewed a candidate for the interim city manager position, Ed Schudel, who has roughly 30-plus years' experience in civil government. And the motion will be to authorize the mayor and the city manager to enter into a contract with Ed Schudel to serve as interim city manager starting July 15th, which would be tomorrow, for a term not to exceed 6 months. Any discussion? I'll make that motion, by the way. So any discussion?
Yeah.
Joe?
Thank you.
You need a second first. I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion with a second. Joe?
Thank you. So hiring this interim city manager, will he have full authority to do, act as a city manager? I mean, I just kind of want to understand the logistics. So could Ed come in and theoretically just start, changing, wholesale changes? And is the city prepared, or are we okay with that happening? Not that it would, or, I just want to understand that, this interim manager has full authority to act as the manager.
Yes, my understanding is, in expectation if I was Ed, that the answer is yes, but also with the ramifications of that. He serves at the pleasure of the council.
Right.
Agree. It would be a disservice to Ed if we came in with the expectation that, well, we want you to be, you'll have a title, interim city manager, but don't really act as a city manager. But if you do act as a city manager and you're thinking of something drastic, you better, and my sense is from talking to him is that he would be approaching us with something drastic. So I made a motion.
Is there a second?
I second it.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Under new business, item B, the interim city manager's choice to be excluded from para.
Mr. Mayor, Council, as part of the contract with Ed, he has selected to be excluded from PARA, which is the Public Employees Retirement Association. In order for him to do so, we need to pass a resolution authorizing that.
Is there a cost to the city in doing that?
No, not that I'm aware of. It's actually not a cost to the city, yes. Otherwise, there would be if he participated.
Right. So you want to make a motion?
If I can get to my right page, I'm sorry.
I can go ahead and do it. I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 14-55, approving an interim city manager's choice to be excluded from participating in the para coordinated plan.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, it passes. Executive search firm. We've retained an interim city manager. I see Richard Fursman approaching the podium.
Ooh, and dislodging your microphone, so all in one swoop. Good evening, Mayor. I think the council has received a proposal for search services, and I understand not only did we get hit once, and your comments, obviously you got hit twice, two very talented people leaving. I'm here to answer questions, maybe do a flyover of what a search process looks like, and answer any questions that you have. I guess I'm at your, whatever you wish, Mayor, for me.
Why don't you give it, Richard, we go back a few years. Why don't you give us a sense of your relationship with the city of Victoria over the past period?
5-6 years, yes. Thank you, Mayor. Council, I've been involved with the city on a strategic level. I have done with my wife and partner. She was hoping to be here. She got called to jury duty this week, so she's having that this evening, or wasn't able to get here in time. We have done several strategic planning sessions with the city, and in fact, it's amazing to see the progress that the community has made over the years. And we were very proud to be part of that, and looking at the vision and the plans that were put in place. And that's pretty much our history. We've done 3 of those planning sessions with the city in the last 6 years.
We're always interested in the cost.
Well, of course. I'm putting up the, if I were to talk about the process a little bit, it's in 3 phases. The first phase is identifying, taking a look at the DNA of the organization, trying to find out where you're going, what you currently have on your to-do list, to try and identify the type of individual that's going to serve you best. And I do that by speaking individually with you, each one of you, and also talking with the staff, taking a look at what the future plans are. So that's phase 1, in developing a profile, and I have some here. This is one I did recently for the city of Lake City.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. And my name's Richard Fersman, and I'm president and owner of Brimmeyer Fersman. What we do is put together a recruiting profile. This profile is intended to reflect the history of the city, a little bit of where you're going, type of individual we want to recruit, and spells out the process from start to finish as far as the timing on it. So anybody applying for the position understands what they're going through, understands the timing, understands what the city is looking for. This recruitment tool is used for sending out and identifying the ideal candidate. This is how we screen the candidates in the end. It's the prism from which we view everybody who applies. That process takes about a month of recruitment. I then take about 3 weeks to review all the resumes, all the cover letters. I screen out the top 20. I interview each one of those people. I also give them some writing assignments and other assessments. I go from the top 20 down to the top 10 to 12, at which point I put together a packet that looks something like this in this binder, and I'll pass a couple of them around for you. It's designed to give you an indication of what the top candidates look like. I have one more here.
Thank you.
I think you have an interview form there. Jim, I think I gave you an interview packet. So what this does, it provides a profile on each one of the candidates, what their strengths are, where their development is needed, a complete history of their professional career along with their education. At this point, you have the top 10 to 12. I have a review meeting with you. We go over this information, and you pick 5 people that you want to interview. I then prepare an interview packet for you. We set the interview date actually is set at the first meeting. I prepare the questions and the review and contact the candidates, prepare them for the interview. sit through the interview with you and help you process your review of each one of the candidates, at which point you pick a candidate, and then I help with the negotiation with those candidates, or the candidate that you choose. So that's a 77-step process that's boiled down to 3 major steps. The price for that is not to exceed $11,000, I think $800 is what I had for one. And provided, if you wanted to go with 2 at the same time, I suggested that we would have a discount of 20% on the second one. It is typically from start to finish about a 3.5 to 4 month process. I become your HR person in charge of the hiring from step A to step Z.
By the way, the fee schedule you quoted, I think everyone knows, they were essentially the same. There were 2 other firms that were asked to compete for this assignment, and the fees were the same.
And there were also some expenses included in that. Expenses typically include advertisements, printing, those type of things, mileage, and for a total not to exceed $14,550. If there are other things you want, we can do that too. But that's the base fee for the services. If you wanted to do other things, I'd be happy to come in and do other things for you. But for the search purposes, that's what I quoted here.
Richard, you probably know us as well as anybody. What are the selling points that you'd magnify to a potential candidate to get them interested in the position?
Well, you've been number one selling point. I think Ed would probably agree with this. Is you've had a stable position here. You had a person who had been in the seat and had a nice run with the community. That's always very positive for a professional looking at this. There are communities not too far from here where they've had a revolving door or a lot of issues. When you have that, it's very hard to recruit. So that's one thing, a stable environment. Number 2, it's been a growing community. It's been a very healthy community in that respect. Even during the downturn, you had a certain amount of growth that was going on in this community, and that is a very positive selling point. 3, I mean, you have just an absolutely beautiful community. I mean, all you have to do is come here and you fall in love with it immediately, and in that respect, it sells itself. You have a redeveloped, very healthy core that you've put a lot of attention into over the last couple of years. It shows that the city council is serious about the health of the community, that the citizens are. Nice trails, beautiful parks. A lot of things that would attract professionals to this area. But those are the main things I see.
Other questions? Joe?
I guess I have 2 questions, Mr. Mayor. Number 1 is the cost for the community development director. It's roughly $10,000 more for that position. Why is that?
That's for 2 searches, Joe, both of them. There's a,
No.
if you break it down, it's one is 14.5 and the other's 12.2.
Okay.
So that's a combination of both.
Those are little details. And then my second question is, if we had a city manager in place now, would the city manager be doing the work to find the community development director?
Let me pose that to Richard. I have a feeling about that, but
Well, I would encourage, if you have an interim, I would encourage that person to apply and be part of the process. What you wouldn't want to do is have a person who could be a potential candidate to also be handling their own hiring process, I think that would be a conflict of interest. Now, if in the interim you decided, you know what, we're getting along so well, can we stop the process, Richard, at this point? I would say sure. Let's settle up on this particular one, we'll stop the process. But I don't see that happening, but if it did, we would be able to say, let's say a month into it, that, you know, thank you for getting us this far, but we've decided to go with our interim permanently. Now, but to hand that process over to an interim for the conflict that I posed, I think it would be hard on that individual. I don't want to speak for Ed, but I think it would be tough to handle a position that you may potentially want to apply for.
Okay, so.
And to screen those candidates.
Yeah. So typically, cities will use your services to hire the administrator, the manager, and then everything else below that, that's up to the manager. I just want to make sure that it's not every time somebody moves, we're going out to...
Yeah, Richard, I think the question was, would if there was a city administrator or manager here today, would they be hiring the community development director? Or
Oh,
would
I
this-
see.
that- yeah.
I'm sorry. I answered the wrong... Well, sure. Yeah, if a city manager was here, I've often worked for cities, city managers, and helping with the recruitment process and getting candidates in the door because of how much time it takes to do that. Certainly then handing over that process to the manager once you have the candidates in place is something that you could do. So you might say, well, let's take, could you help us with the profile development and recruitment, and we'll take it from here, at which point the fee is reduced.
I guess I look at it that it certainly could be city manager's responsibility to hire it. Doesn't mean that it has to be, and it's really our choice to, in a sense, outsource it or not. So.
Mr. Mayor, you're also in and Council, you're also in an interesting position where the person who, if the person is interim and does not move forward, they would be selecting a position that could potentially be with the city for a long time, at which point I think the council would want to be very involved with that hire, the community development director, along with the interim. You probably wouldn't want to just leave it in someone's hand that's going to be leaving fairly soon. Not that they wouldn't be capable of doing it, but you're going to be working with the person a lot longer in that case. My opinion.
I was going to say, I think it's unfortunate that we're in a position where we have to fill these two positions, but that's where we are. I'd like to take it as an opportunity and cast as wide a net as possible and see what the possibilities are. Asking our interim city manager to do that takes him away from two critical processes as well as everyday operations. If that person would have input into the process, I'm more comfortable at this point going with outsourcing or an external firm, I think.
Other comments?
Need a motion?
Yeah, I'll make it. I move we approve agenda statement number 14-112.
One more.
Excuse me? Oops, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are actually two agenda statements, one for just the city manager position, and then we move to the one for the community development director. The one on the table, I think, is just to the city manager.
In order, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I want to get back to the right page. I move we approve resolution 14-111, hire an executive search firm for the city manager position. Can we extend that to include 112? Do them both at once, or do we have to do them separately?
I think I would keep them as separate
Okay.
motions.
So just the city manager's on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll make a motion to approve agenda statement 14-112, retention of an executive search firm for community development director position at the reduced rate, the combined rate of, what, 27 and... I wrote it down. 26,000, not to exceed fee of 26,740.
Second.
All in favor?
Is that, excuse
I'm sorry.
me, is that before the 20% discount? Is that correct?
That's the total. 14 and each search was about 14,000. 14 and 10.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, council, one was 14.5, one was 12.2.
So that's 26, and then 20% of that's about 5,000 off, so it'd be like 21 something? Does that sound right?
No, I believe that was the total.
No, they're normally both 14.
Yes,
it'd be 20%
so the-
off the
I understand, okay,
Okay.
okay. The map. Got it. Thank you.
Just for the record, let me make sure if everybody agrees. The not-to-exceed price for both searches, as I understand it, is 26,740.
Correct.
I made a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
You seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Richard, you start tomorrow, please.
I will, and I'll work with Mr. Schukel to set up, or work with you individually, but I would like to communicate on a regular basis, make sure that I start with getting one-on-one time with each one of you, so we can, and I have a pre-interview form or a pre-meeting form with you that I'll send to you, so you know the type of questions that I'm going to be asking. We'll try and get this profile out right away. So I will schedule that with your staff, if that meets your approval.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda statement 14-113, waiving attorney-client privilege.
I think Richard wants to get his books back.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and council, for consideration this evening, the attorney for the 4 council members who have a legal suit pending has recommended that the council waive the City of Victoria's attorney-client privilege with respect to communications with Kennedy and Graven. And this would be during the periods relevant to the lawsuit regarding open meeting laws. This order is to disclose legal advice from Kennedy Graven, the city's attorney at the time. The City of Victoria's attorney-client privilege with respect to communications with Kennedy and Graven during this period relevant to the lawsuit regarding open meeting laws is waived only for the purpose of this lawsuit. I believe our city attorney is available for questions, concerns, comments. That is for consideration, a resolution waiving
Yeah, my
that
understanding is
privilege.
that this is a very narrow window of waiving those communications.
That is correct. I mean, it's limited to the scope of the lawsuit. And I think, I'm pretty sure that what this has to do with is there was a memorandum that was issued by the city attorney to council with respect to the open meeting law. I don't know the extent of other communications that may have been, that may have occurred, but it is in that very narrow scope of the subject of the litigation. It doesn't obviously affect any communications before the issue of the subject matter of the litigation or after.
I move we approve agenda statement number 14-113.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Waive attorney-client privilege. The water storage facility, authorizing the preliminary design services.
Mayor, council, city engineer Carrie Guerin will be presenting information on the future water storage facility.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have to just pop down to our agenda item. So this is a topic that we've discussed on and off in terms of other elements with the City Council. So our water use continues to be high and the city continues to grow. So between both things, we're reaching the point where we need to bring another water storage facility online for the water system. That primarily relates to being able to fight fires. That's a peak driver of your water storage facility. But a big part of the timing, certainly we're growing, so we're adding new houses to the system, but our existing users continue to use water at an unacceptable rate. If you had an opportunity, there's been some news articles lately in the Star Tribune related to other communities struggling with this issue, and they referenced 120 gallons per capita per day being the highest the reporter could find for water use in the community. Ours is actually higher than that. We've had the wettest year on record, and I continue to drive through the community, and the Public Works Department continues to drive through the community and see people watering their lawns, even though it hasn't stopped raining for months, and I'm running around on drainage complaint issues left and right with people dealing with too much water in their yards. So I don't think that we're going to achieve getting our users to reduce their water anytime soon. As many of you know, we have a very conservative water rate structure that is structured such that it's supposed to discourage people from using that large amount of water. We recently put a map together based on how many people are in the top tier of our water rate structure. So in like third quarter, our highest use, these folks are getting $1,000 water bills, and it's all over the city, lots of lots in single family residential neighborhoods where people are paying to use all of that water. In these same general neighborhoods, I get called out on drainage complaints because the swales in people's yards are wet, and I go and walk them, and they're like, this is wet, what can the city do to make this water go away? And I look around and I see mushrooms growing, and I say, how often are you running your sprinkler system? And they say, oh, I don't know, it's set to every other day, and I don't really think about it. So we have a disconnect problem going on between how much water people are putting on their lawns, how much water they need, and our soil types is a huge factor of that. We have heavy clay soils, so you don't need as much water as you do if you have a sandy soil. So because this topic's on the agenda, I couldn't help but pause and talk about this issue because it's not going away anytime soon. The city is working on ramping up our education and trying to find new ways to educate the public about how much water is needed. We had a booth at Discover Victoria Day. We include information in our newsletter, on the city website, in our utility billing. We've been doing that for a number of years. It doesn't seem to be very effective. Our high water rates don't seem to be very effective to discouraging use, and our citations and our violations for people who are violating outside of our watering restrictions, people just pay it, they don't really care. So we're trying to find new ways to tackle this issue. We're talking about doing a specific targeted meeting where we would invite people who have large water bills into the city and maybe bring a landscaper in to try to have some additional education about how to know how much water your lawn needs. But again, it's not something that we're going to solve anytime soon. So we have new homes coming online, we have water use going up, we need to build additional water storage. At about 2, 3, 4 in the morning, if I have my times correctly, our water tower, the levels in our existing storage facilities plummet because everybody's sprinklers come on. So if we were have a fire occur at the exact same time, we're getting to the point where we're starting to get concerned about having enough storage to fight those fires. So based on our growth projections and looking at our historical water use over the average number of years, because obviously it does go up and down based on how much it's raining, because some people do water less when it's raining more, we have targeted that we do need to get that storage facility online in 2015. So back as part of the Ambergate development, we were able to negotiate with the developer for some property for the purposes of constructing a water storage facility. This property is located, so here's County Road 43, here's the Ambergate development, Rhapsody Park is located right here. We looked at a couple of different opportunities within the site and ended up identifying a portion of property adjacent to the existing Rhapsody Park for a potential site. So as part of that development, that property was placed into an outlot that's being given to the city as part of the development process. So we were able to obtain the land through that process. The next step, though, needs to be to actually evaluate the land to make sure it's viable for the proposed water storage facility. So what I'm looking for is authorization for preliminary design to do some geotechnical evaluation on the site, some preliminary engineering to finalize how big of a storage facility we would locate on the site. The other thing, we are talking about an underground storage facility in this location. The reason that we're recommending underground in this location is due to opposition from the existing neighbors to have an elevated water storage facility at that site. That information came forward during the public hearing process and the neighborhood meeting process with these neighbors, as well as the developer was unwilling to give us the land if we were going to be putting an elevated tank in that location. Due to concerns with sales to the existing homes or the new lots for homes. If for some reason we determined that this site wouldn't be viable for an underground storage facility, it certainly could revert back to being a lot. But based on all of the information we had going in, we don't expect that to be the case. So we solicited proposals from 4 firms in our professional services pool who do this type of work. One of the firms elected not to submit. 2 of the firms actually decided to combine and submit a proposal jointly. They thought they could better deliver the project if they did it as a joint project with both of them working on it. So we received 2 proposals then. The preliminary design phase is what we're talking about authorizing tonight. Overall, for these types of projects, we don't only look at the fee. We make a best value recommendation to the City Council on the basis of several factors. The qualifications of the team, the project manager's experience with being able to deliver a project of this type on time and within budget, a demonstrated understanding of these types of projects, an understanding of the scope and roles for the project, and their collaboration skills during the process. The team of TKDA and Bar Engineering includes a gentleman who's designed many of these underground storage facilities in communities around the Twin Cities, and he seeks to figure out a way to make them an amenity to the community. You know, if there's an opportunity to expand the parkland over the top of the facility, that would be something we would take a look at so that it just blends into the landscape and isn't something that the neighbors aren't happy to live next to. And then the main person from Bar Engineering is somebody who's been working on the city's water system for about 10 years. She had been with a firm prior and is there now, so she's very familiar with our water use and what our projected needs are. She also worked on the comprehensive plan for the city back in 2008. So they certainly are qualified and their fee did come in lower, so that helps as well. Their team, you'll note in the agenda statement that I'm recommending that we also authorize an additional service. So that would bring the total up to $15,530. As part of their proposal, so the existing Rhapsody Park is right here, and in there we have a park shelter, but it's also a water booster station. So there are large booster pumps in that facility that are used to pump water that are at a higher elevation than what our water tower can serve. They suggested that since we're talking about locating these facilities in such close proximity, that we look at whether or not we couldn't repurpose the booster station a little bit to provide pumps for both the booster purpose and then also pumps for the underground storage facility. So if that ends up being able to work, we would save overall costs and the overall project costs for completing the improvements. So to Ann and I, it seemed very worthwhile that we would want to take a look at that as part of the preliminary design phase. So with that, I guess I will take questions.
My recollection was that this was something we were looking at for 2 or 3 years later out, and now it seems to have accelerated. Is that due to the additional development?
So it had been further out, but as we pull historical water use data and hand it over to our water system analysts to take a look at our water use, because our water use is so high, I'm not going to be able to continue our water use by our existing users. I'm not going to be comfortable continuing to recommend that we approve new homes if we don't get this system online, particularly because the growth is happening a lot faster than we thought it was going to. When we were sitting here a couple of years ago and Holly and I were looking at the area around the south side of Lake Wasserman, when we extended the sewer line down there, we were like, oh, it'll be a number of years before all those plats build out along the south side, and they're all coming in a lot faster, both from a platting process and from a construction process. Lakeside Estates Phase 2 is putting curb in the ground, and I wouldn't have expected that to happen so quickly. So the combination of our water use with the fact that everything's happening faster, I'm just not comfortable delaying it. I think Public Works would have preferred to have it online this year based on the operations they have to go through to just make sure that we have what we need for fire protection.
What do we need for fire protection? Because I trust you, but I need more data. I hear that it's the level's going down. By how much? How much do we need to run fire trucks and respond to our average expected fire rate? And so can you help me with more data on that?
I have all of that data available that I would happily share with you. I'm just not prepared to speak to it tonight. We have plenty of information that if you want this to come back with some additional detail at some point, it certainly can.
Because what I'm trying to understand, Kara, is how urgent is the need? Have we reached whatever the tipping point data analysis says? If we reach this point, we can't actually respond to a fire, and if not, then I suspect that we're not. If not, then how far out are we given the projected growth? And I mean, this is all mathematical. We know how many.
Yeah, I have a full report that lays out those numbers if that's something interested in you having a see.
Can you send us a summary on that?
Certainly.
Also, what is the length of time? Let's say, yes, we want to go with this and let's just get it done. So we start with this phase. What's the total length of time of the project?
So in the RFP that was included in your packet, there is a project schedule.
Okay.
So we do, sooner than later, need to get started because the construction period takes a fair amount of time to get a water tower online, so I can't read sideways. Okay, so what we were proposing was that we would have a kickoff meeting. We're a little bit behind schedule because of the additional services that we requested, but we would end up yeah, I'm not finding it now. But anyway, they need a period of time to complete the preliminary design, so that's maybe a 6-week process. Then that comes back to the council because we would need full authorization to go to final design, which is a much more expensive step. Then we would move into final design. We'd look to be bidding in the winter again so that we have an opportunity for better bid prices, and then we'd be constructing the facility to have it online by the end of the construction season in 2015.
So it's an 8-month process once you start?
To get there, yeah.
You start with the design to get to a functioning system, about 8 months?
Yeah, and yeah. So we have included this in the 2015 CIP, Kelly reminded me, and I think we put it in there last fall. We moved it up to 2015.
I guess what I'd like to understand is, given that 8-month time frame and coming back to the data, what's our projected usage over the next 2 years, and where do we reach that tipping point that if we don't have this online, it represents a safety issue? I'm trying to understand
Yeah, and we have trigger charts that kind of show at what point the population, it's not an exact science because it's operational to a certain extent, but we do have that information that we can share.
And then related to this, but I think it's a separate topic that I think it would be, I would enjoy having a conversation about it down the road, and that's talking about our water rate structure. I guess I would consider it a progressive structure that where high users are paying more per unit than low users. And if that's not motivating behavior, then I'd like to understand who defines what high usage is. What is, how do we compare to other communities with respect to that definition of high usage? And if we want to motivate people to use less, what other options are there? Because it's clearly not doing what it's intended to do.
Yeah, historically, we were required to have, the DNR was looking, and I think it was state statute that had us putting in a conservation rate structure in order to get an additional appropriations permit to drill more wells and obtain more water. The state has since relaxed that requirement based on feedback from other cities, so we aren't under an obligation to have a conservation rate structure, but we are under an obligation to decrease the amount of water that we're using per person. So I have plenty of information on that topic, and I would very much welcome a workshop to discuss it in detail and brainstorm ideas for how to reduce use.
Jim was going where I was going to raise the question. Is if excessive usage is really a problem, building this additional tank with no additional behavior modification strategies is just feeding the beast. And I think Jim raises a good point. Who says it's a problem? 120 gallons a person, and it was, I guess it's the Star Tribune said that was high, or somebody?
No, the DNR has a target of how much we're supposed to use because it's not a finite resource, or it is a finite resource. So we are generally starting to see signs of depleted groundwater availability all over the Midwest. There's a lot of data to support. We have monitoring wells and well data all over the state that shows what's happening is we're depleting the groundwater levels faster than they're recharging.
And if we put in an underground tank and don't change usage, we're not addressing the problem.
Correct.
You know, I'm not suggesting we raise our water rates, but maybe I am.
Well, I'm not in favor of progressive tax in terms of water structure, but
Then maybe it's not a problem. Because we have two choices here. We can either contribute business as usual, if you will, spend the $2 million, build the tank, and not and have usage that exceeds the 120 and we're pariahs in the DNR's view, or we can try to change behavior by how? The only logical way to me is raise rates, and I'm not in favor of that. I guess what I'm in favor of is finding out, do we really have a problem? And I think you just volunteered that you could help us understand that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the money we're collecting from those high water rates are being used to pay for this water storage facility. So, you know, this project will be funded from the water fund, which has money in it based on fees collected by new development and by users paying their water bills. So,
just like everything else that we've done from a major project standpoint, we just want to go through the details of the justification to make sure this is absolutely the right thing to do.
certainly.
It's a little bit of a double-edged sword here, or a little bit of wanting our cake and eating it too, because we've been sitting there with a water plant that's running at 25% of capacity and has an enormous bond to pay down, so we're kind of happy when people use a lot of water and send us big checks, right? But at the same time, when you reach that tipping point that now it's driving an additional capital expense, what if we were to have a more typical consumption profile? How many years would that push out the need for this tank based on our just development at a more normal rate?
We were looking at more like, and I actually can give you that answer in specifically what it would be, because the model plugs in what our average per capita use is, so we could reduce that and see where it pushes us on the trigger chart to see in reality how far it would push out. But when we were in recession years and Kelly was asking me, are we going to need anything in the water fund? That was based on what our current historical water use level was. I was saying, so this is like 2008, 2009, I was saying, geez, not till a good beyond 10 years. Like, we don't even need to have it in the long-term financial plan because it's out a decade. But then once we started updating our water use based on 2009, 2010, and I think it was this council that had asked us to update what our historical water use was looking like, the average per capita use, instead of decreasing, which was what the plan was based on, is actually going higher than what the plan had been based on in 2008. So it's not a capital improvement that you wouldn't have to do, but you are exactly correct that you're accelerating it. So that's very easy math that we can do in the model and say to you, okay, well, if we had this gallons per capita use, we wouldn't have to build this facility until year X. The other thing around the corner associated with the same water use is another well. We're going to need another well because we don't have enough groundwater capacity to feed everybody's sprinkler systems. So we're going to be looking at another well potentially in 2016, and then at some point you'll fill the capacity of the water treatment plant and need another one of those. So it isn't just the storage that ends up getting impacted, it's the whole water system.
Are there metrics that relate the degradation of the use or the lessening of the use with the rate charged, higher rates, lower usage? Are there metrics we could put confidence?
Metrics compared to what other communities are doing don't seem to be relevant because we do, in our defense, we have a lot of new sod too, so we have a lot of, certainly going to water your lawn more as it's new, but we have a whole lot of data within our own system of who is using the most water compared to each other, which actually I found to be pretty interesting when you look at, we have a graphic that I can share that shows the different tiers. If you look at your water bill and you have the different tiers, we've got everybody's houses mapped out, which tier they're in on an average third quarter water usage over the last couple of years, and it's interesting to see where everybody's sitting.
The question to me that's fundamental is, do we really have a water usage problem? And if we do, we better do something besides build another tank.
Yeah.
And an underground well. Another well.
That certainly has been something we've been talking about as a staff level, and to whatever extent the council's agenda allows, I would be happy to bring all that data to a workshop and go through it.
Well, you've got a few things on your plate. Do you need this approved tonight to do the...
Well, I guess I was going to ask that question. So I guess I'm okay going forward with the study, providing that the results of the study do not require us going forward with the storage facility at this time, that we could take the results, and if we decided to put this off a year, we can still use that and kick it off at that time, or do we have to go back and do it again?
Yeah, I think we want to get the preliminary design phase, because even if you were to delay the tower, you have a site that you want to make sure works for you. If for some reason it doesn't work, we would certainly want to revisit that discussion with Mattamy so they could put a house there. But I think before we would bring the preliminary design back, it probably makes sense for us to have a workshop to dive into these issues before I'm asking you for authorization of final design, which is much more money. So.
And then a question for Kelly is, this is marked as budgeted under the 2015 capital improvement projects. So we would be spending the money in 2014. I know government accounting works different from business accounting. Normally I'd say, this is coming out of cash flow this year, it has to come out of this budget. Could you just explain that for the record, please?
Yes, we have $2 million in our CIP for water storage, and we've got it planned right now in 2015. And it's similar to our street reconstruction projects, where we have a little bit of design work, feasibility studies. In 1 year, we have the bulk of the project in the main, the main year, and then the following year is kind of the final cleanup. So it's similar to that. We didn't really have any firm numbers. We added it last fall, So we just put everything in 2015, and that's why it was marked as budgeted.
So the cash is on hand now in the water fund, but it's budgeted for next year, it just gets decremented that amount?
Yeah, it's in the CIP.
Okay.
So I have two questions, and one is that this is also tied to maintaining standard fire flow capabilities. Has that standard changed at all in the last few years?
I'm not the best person to answer that, but I can confirm the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
I-
And then,
Yeah, I'm not even going to venture to guess.
and then the other question is, do we have the full amount of funds in the water core fund today, or is that projected? How's that sitting right now?
Right now, we've got close to $3 million in our water fund, and
No other major expenses that are planned for that money at this point?
no, and based on what we need to have for reserves for working capital, emergencies, the $2 million is, we can do that and not be risking, cash flow or other problems, so.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly.
Kelly, back on the 13.5 acres topic, is that loan taken from the water fund, and if so, how much do we owe the water fund from that land purchase, however many years ago that was?
Yes, there is still about $783,000 owed to the water fund. So $150,000 is being repaid each year, and that $150,000 is factored into the cash flow each year until I think 2019 is when it's scheduled to be fully paid, unless we sell the land.
So that's another thing that comes to play, is selling 13.5 acres is reparation of that in the water fund, so. Thank you.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we authorize the team of TKDA/Bar Engineering to complete preliminary design phase surface services, including evaluation of use of the existing booster station for the water storage facility project in the lump sum amount of $15,530, and that is agenda statement number 14-114.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the facility study. Who's going to handle the Public Works Facility June update? Ann, would that be you?
Yes, but we will, these two items, the City Hall Library Project pay requests and then the Public Works Facility June payment request, we thought that this would be a good opportunity to update council on the status and how the project is moving along. So the first one will be Kara.
Mayor and council, typically, you'll see these items as, on other large projects, they're typically on the consent agenda. We're putting them not on the consent agenda because we figured it would give us an opportunity for us to provide an update to the council in a little bit more detail on what's happening with the construction projects. So in the case of the City Hall and Library, if you've had an opportunity to get over there lately, you'll notice a large structure has been erected in the middle of what will be the City Hall building. That is the shaft for the elevators. So we were faced with some delays in getting the project started relating to permitting from outside agencies and weather. Obviously, it was raining quite a bit, including the day of the groundbreaking. But once we got through those things, they were able to get to work. So far, the external site work associated with just making sure that the water lines and the sewer lines are in the right place where they come into the building and getting some conduit in place for electrical lines, telephone lines, the fiber optic. That sort of underground work happened first, then the footings and foundation were constructed. So when you go over there now, you can get a pretty good viewpoint of the what the footprint looks like for the building, and the contractor has started work on the elevator. So that's, you're seeing the elevator shaft construction there now. So generally, they're often a good starting basis in getting moving on things. Generally, though, it looks like that project is sitting, as it sits today, about a month behind schedule with the delays that we had in the building. The contractor is not yet saying that they won't have an opportunity to potentially move that up from being a month behind schedule, but that's the best information they had at our weekly meeting this past week. That would put us more at the December 1st timeframe for substantial completion, so we still shouldn't be in jeopardy of our plan to move from this building to that building between Christmas and New Year's was our targeted hope for relocating, since things are a bit quieter then.
Cost?
Cost, there hasn't been any new surprises related to cost. City staff is very, very busy working on the stuff that needs to happen once the building's in place. So the low voltage package that needs to occur within the building, furniture purchasing. So Ann and I expect that at the council meeting on the 28th, we'll be providing an update on the overall budget. Right now, we don't have any information to suggest that we've moved anywhere. We're still within the budget as far as we know, but we have more numbers coming in on some of those subsequent pieces that we need to work on. So our plan is to also continue we're monitoring the overall budget spreadsheet pretty closely. Ann and I met on it again today, so take a look at that. But so far, nothing new. So the agenda item is actually specifically to approve the payment. So this also is in your claims roster as approved claims, but we do it as a separate agenda item so that the record's clear. So this one is to pay 4 different contractors in various amounts as outlined on the attached summary, as well as payment application number 2 to Stahl for the general conditions and their work on the project. And with that, I will take any questions on this.
Anyone? I'll make a motion to approve pay application number 1 for various contractors and pay application number 2 for Stahl. The amounts are $6,640.50 for the contractors and $20,114.15 for Stahl Construction.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. One more. If there's nothing else on that, how about, Ann, you want to do Public Works?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, Council. The Public Works building is actually only about a week behind schedule as of last week. The grading is occurring on site. Footings are anticipated to start on the 21st of this month, and the building delivered towards the end of this month. So we're staying pretty well on schedule even with all the rain. I do anticipate bringing several items forward at the next council meeting for approval. Permanent electric to the site, hoist and crane, and then Kara's getting bids for utility work to the site that I anticipate bringing at the next council meeting. We too have several items that we have to purchase as part of the project, equipment, things like that, and we'll be slowly working on that over the next couple of months. So otherwise, we're progressing fairly well.
And I just noticed that the agenda statement I read referred to the Public Works facility. So we approved the payment for the Public Works facility with my prior, now we have to go back and approve for the City Hall. Now that everybody's confused, make a motion to authorize payment in the amount of $145,466.58 for the contractors and $13,359.43 for Stahl Construction.
I'll second that one too.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I think we paid the bills up to date. One last item on the agenda, hiring a consulting firm for the planning department.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Kara Guerin will be handling this agenda item.
Kara?
So with the news of Holly's departure, aside from me feeling sad, but I also went into a little bit of panic mode because there's a whole lot of work going on that requires planning expertise. Most notably is we do have, did I put it in here? 6 new applications for development that we're expecting to come in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Some of it is final plat of, one example is the Cheval addition that the council approved preliminary plat for some time ago. They're expecting to submit final plat. We got a sketch plat in today for the property north of Amber Gate, and Holly has a handful of others that are coming in. So there's an immediate need for assistance with things like development review process, but then from a city staff perspective, there's things that come in every day that she reviews that none of us have the expertise to review. So zoning permits, fence permits, she has a portion of responsibility of reviewing building permits. Some of those things, if any of us had capacity, we could probably take a crack at pieces of them, but the service would be really slow, and we all have our plates full with the jobs we normally do. So Don and Holly recommended that we contact a planning consultant to help us out in the interim until the position is filled. The city has done this in the past between the many planning department positions that I've worked for the city. As we've turned over, we've pulled in somebody to help on the interim basis until somebody gets on board. So with some suggestions from Holly and experience I've had, and from Ed gave us a suggestion too, we contacted a handful of different people who have this skill set who could do the type of work. What ends up being most important when you contact them is to find out what their availability is to attend planning commission meetings and city council meetings, because you can't be at 2 planning commission meetings at once. So pretty quickly, we were able to narrow down to one firm that would be good for the position. They have a planner and an associate planner that would be available for the city to use, so we'd have 2 different levels of expertise depending on the type of work. Holly recommended that we would probably need office hours we'd probably need their help out of the gates about 10 to 15 hours a week, just to keep the lights on and keep us moving. We've reviewed with Kelly the savings associated with that position, and we would have adequate money to fund the consultant planner in the short term to keep things moving. The firm that I'm recommending, so I apologize for this not being in the packet, but we didn't hear from the last firm that we wanted to contact until about 4:15 today. They were checking if they had capacity. So the firm I'm recommending is Sambatech. They used to be MFRA, so if you've been associated with this type of work before, you've maybe heard of MFRA, but not Sambatech. They just changed their name recently. The individual who would be the primary planner is a gentleman by the name of Ben Gazzola. Ann and I have worked with him a little bit on a Met Council project, but he did a similar role for the city of Lake Elmo recently when they had some staff turnover. So my staff and the city of Lake Elmo staff have had a lot of opportunity to work with him. He does a nice job of being organized, getting his work delivered efficiently, and then leaving and not doing work he doesn't need to do. He would be assisted by Laura Chamberlain, so she's an associate planner, so she would come at a slightly reduced hourly rate. So for things like fence permits, you wouldn't necessarily want the senior planner reviewing things as simple as that. Staff would like the city council to approve this tonight, because ideally we'd like to have this person here before Holly leaves, so that Holly can bring them up to speed on all things planning that Ann and I aren't necessarily comfortable saying. Her last day in the office is the 22nd, so a week from tomorrow.
Kara, what are the rates?
The senior planner's rate is $125 an hour, and the associate planner's rate is $90 an hour. There are some of the smaller firms that are like a little bit more like Focus Engineering type firms that have lower rates, but they didn't have the capacity to attend the meetings and commit to the level of hours. The other thing is we had to be a little bit open-ended on the timeline. We don't know how long we're going to need their help. maybe 3 months, 4 months. What we would do is we'd put them into the professional services pool, same as the other consultants we work with, and we'd just issue a task order for the work so we can stop using them on a day's notice if we don't need their help anymore.
Is there any overt statement either for or against hiring them as a permanent employee? Are we precluded from it?
They work for a firm. I can't imagine either of them would be interested in the permanent position.
Other comments, questions?
So how do we know how much we're going to pay? It's just $125?
Well, what we would have to do is manage the work we assign to them to keep it within what our budget allows. So if it starts, so the budget that's available is limited to what we were paying as a salary for
Okay.
the position. So if it looks like we need more work, then I'd be going to Holly or to Kelly saying we need more hours, and then we'd have to figure out with the council how to pay for it.
And under the city manager form of government, our new interim city manager has responsibility for HR. Am I correct, Ed, that you're in favor of doing this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all we need to do is slow down a developer who's anxious to have a plat approved. We've never done that in recent history for sure. Our reputation is we get stuff done. We surely want to maintain that, so.
Yeah, I move we approve agenda statement number 14-117, authorizing the addition of a firm to the city's professional services pool as recommended by staff in that agenda statement.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We've hired. Kara, go ahead and make the hire. And you have, as acting city manager, do you have anything to report?
I do. I'd just like to take a moment to talk about last Wednesday, if anybody was in attendance at the Classic Car and Elvis show, that it was a very well-attended event, and I'm sure that I'm going to be asked to work with the Classic Car people again in the future for a combination of concerts and cars. So it was very well-attended. I was shocked, but...
And the combination of those two cars and the concert down in downtown is something that we can consider again?
Oh, sir, I think so. Based on the early reports that I got, there were about 175 cars and in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,200 people down there that night. So
Downtown was jammed.
yes, so
It was jammed.
Well done.
Very well.
thanks. Just thought we'd let everybody know.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
Nothing else.
Council members, anything?
No report.
How about the city attorney?
I will remain silent.
If nothing else, can I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.